mango raspberry kiwi waffle, and I'm going to talk about Can You Spell Revolution by Matt Beam. And James is going to drink his cabbage juice, and his waffle has pineapple as well. And I shared my half of the kiwi with him because it looks pretty.
That's very nice, yeah. So, yeah, you don't care for pineapple nearly as much as I do, so that's how I end up with the extra pineapple.
When James and I were first going together, he kept bringing me pineapple.
Because I have a sweet palate. Pauline likes dairy.
Yeah.
Much more than I do. I like sweet much more than.
But coconut cream is good too, but I can't really have that either. Anyway, this book is not well written. I read it in between, like when we did our last one today and now. So it didn't take long to read. It's not a long book, as you can see. It's I should tell you, it's intended for young adult audience, and the kids in the story are grade 8 students, and they don't. It's anyway. And no grade 8 students would know of or be interested in knowing of revolutionary figures. I can believe that a student whose dad is a prof, who has moved him all over Canada, would seem worldly and become the leader in a pack of teens. But I guess 15, not 13. I can't imagine anyone of either age, 15 or 13, would read this though. The dialogue isn't even believable for 13-year-olds. Example, page 82. Let's see what I decided to, as I could have picked it any part, really. Me too. I shouldn't have snapped like that. Yes, you should have. You can't play it safe and quiet forever. They don't talk like that.
No, sounds about right.
Yeah, sounds that was the only part that worked there. And I mean, this is terrible. Like, they'll talk about revolutionary people and stuff.
13-year-olds.
Yeah, and they're...
Okay.
Anyway.
I was a sharp 13-year-old, and I barely know about them.
Yeah, they're using words like proletariat.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. Some young, geeky uni kids might talk like these kids do. This is such a struggle to get through. I would rather read an encyclopedia set than this book. The about the author indicates that he has taught, but doesn't mention what exactly he taught. Was it high school social studies? It's like he did some basic wiki research on a handful of historical figures and decided to turn it into a novel for profit. I can't imagine he would have made any money off this book, though. It's so bad. It's so bad.
It's so bad. I'm tempted to read it.
No!
Well, I'm interested in things like revolution and stuff like that. So Pauline asked me to bring out some stuff having to do Cold War. I've been threatening. Well, I actually started reading this one a while back. The Amazing Canadian-Soviet Hockey Series, 1972. It was more amazing than it should have been. Canada should have been much better prepared and should have beaten the Soviets quite badly, and Canada was hampered by having Bobby Orr getting
it is a great title.
Not playing.
It's a great title for
Cold
the book.
War.
Yeah,
exactly right.
It is.
It's
Whoever thought
nice.
that one up was really doing the job.
And Bobby Hull wasn't allowed by the NHL to participate, even though this was theoretically for Canada, because he'd gone over to the dark side, not the Russian side, but the WHA, World Hockey Association, playing for the Winnipeg Jets. They were named after him. He was the Golden Jet. And so a hockey and historical masterpiece. That's a blurb from Bob McGregor, author of... So I'll be covering this in detail sometime, maybe not today. And then this is something that I'm going to be covering in much more detail than a lot of you folk would like. So it comes from, I've threatened to few fellas with it and gals with it before. Um, so it's from a publishing company that I suspect I wouldn't care to be associated with. It's a politically incorrect guide, so that's an acronym, not an initialism. PIG, so is what the anachronism, the acronym. The politically incorrect guide to socialism. They've done, I threatened you with the politically incorrect guide of Islam, and looking at their list of publications, some of it looks a little bit frightening. Politically incorrect guide to the South. It's got a Confederate flag on the cover. Politically incorrect guide to global warming. A politically incorrect guide to American history. It's a guy dressed up in a Confederate suit, and he's got a sword at his side. What else? Politically incorrect guide to Darwinism and intelligent design. I'm afraid it might be borderline creationist.
Well,
what do you want to say?
I was going to say that it's good you're giving people an idea of what side of the spectrum this is coming off on.
Well, it's not nearly as bad as I was worried it was going to be when I picked it up. So a politically incorrect guide to hunting. That's a little bit scary. It doesn't. There's a caribou. I think it's a caribou or a reindeer. Inadvertently shot the herder too, not just the herd. Politically incorrect guide to Vietnam War. Politically incorrect guide to the founding fathers, all this sort of stuff. So this has some interesting facts in it. The fellow is what is he? Kevin D. Williamson is deputy managing editor of National Review. So that's not really wild-eyed and crazy as I recall. No more wild-eyed and crazy than who's the guy that founded it? Was it William F. Buckley Jr.? Something like that. I think he was involved with it, but it might be a different thing. So I think Buckley was at least borderline crazy, but not as crazy as some people hanging out on the right wing. So Kevin D. Williamson, a columnist for the New Criterion. I don't know how wild and crazy that thing is. And an adjunct professor. Adjunct just ain't that hot. But at the King's College in New York City. So it's not exactly what is the prestigious one in New York City. It's not exactly Columbia. Not even NYU, New York University. It's not even Hunter College. There's a variety of different things. City, University of New York, so on and so forth. This is back to Kevin Williamson, a frequent commentator on politics and economics, like here, out of politics and economics, has appeared on the Glenn Beck Show. That's okay. Glenn Beck is borderline crazy, okay? I used to watch him when he was on CNN. He occasionally gets some things right, but he had trouble keeping his eyes from kind of bugging out and spinning at the same time, poor fella. And they finally punted him off CNN, and this is about 10 years ago.
That's amazing. What did he do?
Well, he got his own show, the Glenn Beck Show. I don't know whether it's offered by a particular, what is it like? I guess you can just dial things up nowadays. You don't have to belong to a network. Is that
so? Did he really not? Like, he didn't really get punted off the show. It was just.
Oh, he got punted, I think, along with Lou Dobbs. He's crazy chimp. I don't know which one is crazier, really. I think Lou Dobbs, not more. But I think they might have found a little protection under the wings of the predatory wings of Fox Network, Fox News Network, or whatever it's called. And then back to Kevin D. Williamson, the Kudlow Report, whatever that is, the CBS Evening News. So he's appeared on the CBS Evening News. BBC, I'm sure they were interrupting him right, left, and center. Oh, well, left and left and left. Thank you, BBC. They're a little bit like the CBC on the verse. Power and Politics, back to Kevin D. Williamson. And dozens of talk radio programs. That is not something you want to post. Talk radio. Rush Limbaugh, I presume, and others of that ilk. He's back to Kevin D. Williamson, a native of West Texas. Well, okay. I think that probably is further west from where Buddy Holly came from. So I don't want to denigrate West Texas. There's probably some nice folks that have come out of there. I suspect Buddy Holly was a pretty nice guy. He actually married a Latino woman. I was going to say Mexican woman, but what was his name? Trini Lopez, who died recently. Actually, hopefully it wasn't from COVID, but it might well have been within the last couple of years. He was from Dallas, Texas. Like a Latino background, but native Texan. That's Kevin D. Williamson back then, currently lives in the South Bronx. Someone was saying, I don't know how true it is, the Bronx is the poorest per capita county in all of the United States. Wow. Okay. But maybe cheers for the Yankees now instead of Texas Rangers or Houston Astros or whatever. Bronx. That's the famous product, I think, the most famous product of the Bronx is New York Yankees. Anyway, this guy comes from we've got at least one person at this ilk at the university, and he taught Pauline. I'm not going to mention his name, but boasts the best crew cut I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot, because I saw the latter part of the 50s. But at this late date, hopefully still boasting that.
He's a very excellent instructor.
There you go. I haven't mentioned the name. But he believes in, he follows von Hayek. And I think Hayek dropped the fun, but I believe he came from aristocratic, or at least fake aristocratic background. And this guy this guy mentions von Hayek again and again and again and again. And he also mentions, what was his name? Ludwig von Mises is actually how you should say Mises, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he mentions one of their disciples, Milton Friedman. All the Germanic sounding names. I think Milton Friedman would be a little bit come from more like hybrid figure. Definitely not aristocratic, because I think he'd be at least partly Jewish. And I think he came out from the University of Chicago, and he kind of came up with the New Testament for capitalism. Milton Friedman. I own that book. I've actually gone through it. It's wonderful. But of course, the Old Testament is Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Yeah, I own that book, and I've read it too, cover to cover. It's not that good, but it's not that bad, as opposed to Milton Friedman's little magnum opus. I almost said opus magnum, but in Latin, when you get adjectives of size, you put it before the noun. Other adjectives, you tend to put after the noun. There'd be exceptions to the rule, I suppose, but there you go. So these guys aren't considered von Mises and Hayek or von Hayek. I could be wrong about the von. There might not have been a VON before his name. That's not Victorian order of nurses. And Milton Friedman, they're not considered wild-eyed radicals or stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff offered by this publishing company that I'm afraid would be wild-eyed radicalism. But I think they were wild-eyed, but not radical. So I'm talking about von Mises and von Hayek and Milton Friedman. So one of the things they seem to believe in is, and they probably still do, if Milton Friedman is still alive, these other two are probably on their third or fourth incarnation. But is creative destruction. Wow. When you run across paradox like that, like Einstein's concept that light is a wave and a particle. It's not a wave and a particle. Wave and a particle. Or what's another? 95% of the universe is made out of dark energy. Dark energy paradox. When you run across that, time to go to the drawing board, back to the drawing board. Because, hey, when it comes to creative destruction, people know. Creative destruction, 1929 to 1933. The Japanese militarists take over in Japan, 1931. January 30th, 1933. Guess who was elected? No, it's not FDR. He was elected in 32. And he came to power, I think, a little bit later than January 33. January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler. That's creative destruction. So within 16 years of the beginning of that era of creative destruction, between 29 and the first few weeks of 33, within that period, that's the Great Depression. Not the Greater Depression, which is an invention of people like von Hayek. The 30s was actually, most of it, after the end of 32, was a time of recovery. Huge recovery. Because these idiot, laissez-faire capitalists in the United States let the economy, they just sat on their hands. And I don't have to tell you where the thumbs were. Both of them. But they just let the world go into the toilet. Not just the United States, the world economy. And within 16 years, you've got 65 million dead in World War II. Creative destruction. What I call that is destructive destruction. It's like what someone said recently about COVID. What happens, and the various top doctors across Canada, and Anthony Fauci, so on and so forth. What happens when you mix politics with health, medicine? You get politics. What happens when you mix creation with destruction? You get destruction. You don't get creative destruction. You get destruction. This is what happened in the wake. I predicted it based on what's happened, particularly 29 to 33, but with other downturns. People turn to extreme solutions when relatively, and only relatively, centralist kind of solutions don't work. So you get the laissez-faire, which is only relatively centralized, or central, and it doesn't work. And people go, oh, in the 30s, they rush off to the right wing, they rush off to the left wing, and then the two things clash. Brilliant. Look at what's happened in the wake of 2008. ISIS, Donald Trump, Antifa, or however they want to call themselves or style themselves. I just call them Richard heads. And that's when I'm being nice, because they're way worse than that. Putin. On and on it goes. On Ping in China. People's Republic of China. Horrible, horrible, horrible people. Horrible, horrible. The convoy. Both right, left, and all over the place. People looking for extreme solutions. Doesn't work. Creative destruction. So this guy, believe me, I'm not on his side of things. But socialism. He's taking it. So he's got Marx here with a little pin on his lapel. Obama. And he's got he's looking for his heart, I think, or else tickling his nipple. I'm not sure which it is. Stalin would do this too, but they get that presumably from Napoleon. I think that's probably taken from a photograph of Karl Marx. But my favorite joke about them is Marx, Stalin, Napoleon too. When they're going like this, they're checking their. Where is that? Have I got the proper side here? I can't detect it. They didn't have hearts. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff in here. There is a lot of stuff in here. It is not thick enough to actually give you a proper sense of what socialism is like. But, you know, I believe it's in here where this dude is talking about India. It's good. He had something like democracy starting 1947. Pretty well continuously. There was a little time when there was some martial law in India again. And what he says, and I'm afraid it's probably something close to the truth. 47, India's per capita GDP was roughly what South Korea's was. Is it that way now? Social democracy. And South Korea was horrible, according to the 60s and 70s rat. Oh, horrible. It should be overthrown. Should be taken over by North Korea. And that's another story. But, you know, the stats that I've got from 2004, it's a little while back. Maybe South Korea's economy's crashed. Or maybe it's doing even better, what with K-pop and Kia and Hyundai and stuff like that. I think it's doing better. But 2004, around there, per capita GDP for South Korea was something like 16,000 and change. I think it's 17,000, but I'm going to go with a lower figure that's kind of in my memory. And India, what the hey was it per capita GDP? Under 5,000.
What's the birth rate?
Well, it's probably fairly low for South Korea by comparison with. That's one of the differences. You know, you got to control your birth rate, but there are other factors involved. So, for example, if we look just across the border from South Korea, per capita GDP, South Korea. Now, I've got more recent figures that indicate it's the per capita GDP is hovering now around 20,000. Might have even gone over that. Whereas North Korea, 2004. 1,000 per year. Okay, so that's underperformance. That's severe underperformance. Now, this guy should have dealt more with more statistics, and I'll be giving these stats to you. In 2004, and it is sobering. That's an accent on every syllable. If you're a socialist, when you even look at Putin. Someone was saying recently, someone who's got the 3 degrees, which is almost like the nth degree, 3 degrees, saying Putin's a capitalist. And he repeated it to another person. He's a capitalist. Oh, that's interesting. Because, you know, like, he just doesn't behave like a capitalist. He behaves more like Hitler. Hitler was, what was he? Oh yeah, he's a failed house painter. And Himmler, the head of the SS. What was, oh yeah, he was, I don't know if he's failed, but he was a former chicken farmer. Yeah. Neither of those kind of folks are capitalists. That's who Putin behaves like. Yeah, he's one of the richest guys in the world. But, you know, like Roman Abramovich, one of his little minions, controlled Chelsea Football Club until recently. Well, you know, like, Abramovich, he's a capitalist because he's rich. Oh, you know, like you look at Emirates Stadium. Where is that? Is that in Manchester or something like that? At any rate, the Manchester City Football Club, controlled by a Saudi prince. I think he's a prince. Oh, you know, like, or he's a rich Saudi. That rich Saudi is not a capitalist. Newsflash, he's not a capitalist. Roman Abramovich is not a capitalist. He's an oligarch. Yeah? Get that straight. But even someone as incompetent as Putin, he's actually allowed the Russian agriculture to produce maybe, 20% of the world's wheat exports? When I was a kid, in the 60s and 70s, and perhaps even the 80s, the Russians were having to import wheat. So even with Putin's incompetence, he's managed to get Russia's agriculture back on beam again. Jeez, that's how bad the socialism was in the so-called Soviet Union. Right? So I'll be giving you the stats on, Vietnam. 2004 per capita GDP $2,500 a year. Per capita GDP of the Chinese nationalists went to Taiwan after they were kicked out of the mainland of China, and I believe the per capita GDP in Taiwan was over $20,000 a year. 20,000 as opposed to 2,500 in Vietnam. 1,700 for Cambodia and Laos. So if you average that out, it might be that Taiwan had 10 times the per capita GDP of these workers' paradises in Southeast Asia. Brilliant. So we talked a little bit about hockey with the Cold War. There's one thing I wanted to do earlier. Guy Lafleur died a couple of days back. And he's, I think, only a couple of years older than me. He might have been 70 when he died. It's a shame, but he's a chain smoker. And he a little bit of trouble with a drink. I don't know how long that lasted. He almost died in a car accident. I guess it would have been 40 years ago, something like that. So I'm going to start reading it. I don't know if I have enough time. This comes from someone who would have been something like a mortal enemy, at least on ice. This is grapes on cherry. And, the day Lafleur died, someone on CBC, they finally got something right. They said the highlight of Guy Lafleur's career was somewhere around late April 1979. And he helped the Canadians win their 4th Stanley Cup in a row and 6th in 9 years. This is the greatest hockey club ever. The Canadians in the 1970s. No other team has won 6 in 9 years. The Oilers won 5 and 7. The Canadians of the late 50s won 5 in a row, but then they lost the next 4. They might have won, they would have been close. So I'll just start reading it. So this is just into the semifinals. Anyway, Blue was the one who tipped me about playing Gilbert. Gilbert was the backup goaltender for the Bruins. And he played well against the Canadiens. And he played well in this final game, 7th game of the semifinals. He's a very good goaltender. And Gilly just came up great. How much time have we got? A couple of minutes?
Just keep reading. 1 minute.
We were down to the 7th game, and I knew that he would play better than ever in front of the French-speaking crowd. It's in Montreal, 7th game. French-Canadian hockey players have a special pride in their culture. Playing in the Montreal Forum is to them what a pilgrimage to Mecca is to a Muslim. Of course, it meant a lot to the English-speaking players as well. I looked at Brad Park, and I could have cried. Here he was, 30 years old, should have been in the prime of his hockey life, and yet, judging by his wan face, you would have figured he was playing the last game of his life. His knees had had all the cartilages taken out, but they never took his heart out. Park realized that this might be his last time he would get so close to sipping Stanley Cup champagne. He knew in his heart that if we could just get past the Canadiens, we'd destroy, and they would have, the New York Rangers in the finals. So tune in